and now I definitely want to hear some info about how Golden State built a dynasty.
Yeah. Okay. So I found this really interesting. So recently there was a Ringer podcast episode, the Real Ones episode on September 21st of this year. They brought back Coach Steve Kerr, who's the coach of the Golden State Warriors, former executive for the Suns, former teammate of Michael Jordan. He's got a lot of wins under his belt, right? And he's participated in a lot of wins. He himself is not necessarily wasn't necessarily a star player, but he definitely was a really important role player and has had a lot of experience managing people, especially after his career as a player. So the hosts of the show are Logan Murdoch and Raja Bell, also another former player, and they decided to talk to Steve Kerr about the Golden State Warriors and the dynasty that they've created and the culture they've created. So I found it really, really interesting. So like our topic today about Golden State will be kind of about team building and having multiple philosophies and multiple objectives at once, and still seeing how that can still coalesce into like an overarching kind of goal here, right? So I guess for a little bit of context for those people that aren't really familiar with the NBA or basketball in general, the Golden State Warriors have been a dynasty for quite a long time, right? It's been a while where Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green have been extremely successful players, Hall
Oh
of Famer
yeah,
levels, yeah, and
forever, bro.
yeah, forever. Like since we were wee lads ourselves. Anyway, so they're kind of on what we might call the back nine of their careers, right? Where they're aging a bit, quite a bit, and they'll probably be out of the league in a couple of years, right? But they still got like a good run in them. In fact, they won last year the
Hmm.
championship. They won the whole thing last year. A
Yeah,
lot of people didn't think they could get there. I personally would have thought those were fools because
yeah,
they're
bro. Their core is too
yeah,
good.
their core is too good. Their core is really, really good, right? It's hard to emphasize just how good they are, right? But it's important for us to realize that a lot of people were doubting them, right? And then now, because they were bad for a few years, they got a lot of good like draft picks, right? And so this is really interesting. I think they have another half of their team is kind of at the very, very beginning of their careers, right? Jordan
Yeah,
Poole, recently selected 28th overall in 2019, so just 3 years ago. James Wiseman, second overall in 2020. Jonathan Kuminga, seventh overall in 2021. Right, so these players are all what, like 18, 19 years old, like mirroring
hmm,
esports as well, right? Where people are very, very young.
right.
When they first come onto the scene, they may still have a long way to develop. They could be
They're raw
considered,
skill
yeah,
wise, a
like
lot of people say,
projects.
but very athletic
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
sense.
So like
Yeah.
basically the raw talent, like maybe the raw aimers or like people that are just like super super I don't know, like skilled mechanically in like any video game. This is kind of like what that's like, right? The draft is the way for the NBA to get those talents on the teams, right? Now, so the original group of players is like the Splash Bros. You know them, right? So they're really good with the 3 pointers and the movement. Whereas it's been really hard for the new young group of players because it's such a team oriented approach. There's a lot of read and react plays, right? So then it relies a lot, very heavily on experience, right? Experience,
Hmm.
player movement, and all this in this stuff. Maybe stuff that haven't. They're like you need to have honed it with experience and a lot of like mental skill, right? So they just don't have that yet. They're too young for that, right? So it's like really
Hmm.
been hard to like integrate them into this team that is kind of in a way trying to win now, right? Whereas they personally are trying to grow now, right?
Yeah.
So like eventually the vision is there though, right? Because like these are like really athletic young players, like 18 years old, 19 years old, jump through the roof, dunk like crazy, right? So that they'll
With
eventually have
skills,
something,
etc.
yeah, a different set of skills. Like for example, they're saying that James Wiseman or John the Kaminga will be alley oop lob threats. They just have like
For
really good
sure.
isolation scoring possibilities that maybe even the original group didn't have. Of course, Steph Curry can do it in ISO, but they're more team reliant, right? The original group, so
Hmm.
their
Right.
philosophy and team are going to be changing as time goes on, right? So it's really interesting. I thought if you guys have a chance to go listen to that podcast and sort of listen to how Steve Kerr has a really tough job as coach, right? Because he has a lot of different people in various different parts of their careers, right? So here's a quote that I thought was really interesting that I pulled. So he says, "I understand as coach, to understand those sets of circumstances for each guy and help each guy kind of learn to navigate their own circumstances within the context of what we're trying to do as a team. And he says it's even more important, like his role, he says, is even more important than figuring out what play we're going to run, right? So, you know, like that's what you traditionally think a coach is, but in his regard, in his respect, you know, a lot of the time, like the plays will kind of take care of themselves, or the players will figure it out themselves. It's almost like the X's and O's are perhaps even less important than the personality management aspect in this case, or like the people management, or trying to make sure ensure that the specific players are able to succeed within the context of the team as a whole, right? And I think it was really interesting to me because I did want to hear what he had to say about it personally. But it's a relatively different philosophy or approach than a lot of teams do, because the standard in NBA basketball is like a lot of time tanking, right? Like if you're bad, be very bad, right? Like that sounds like pretty terrible, right? Because like you don't, you know, in competition you don't want to be bad on purpose, right? But like the bad teams get better draft picks, right? Or they have better opportunities to like rebound back quicker if they can have a franchise changing player all of a sudden, right? And that makes sense, right? But Golden State has kind of like opted for this almost like in between mentality where you know, like most rebuilding teams will just throw their young players out there, let them make mistakes, just go out there and get as much experience as possible. But like the emphasis on this team, of course, is like they're winning now, right? So being on a championship team for the development and winning at the same time don't always go hand in hand. And Coach Kerr was talking about this. It was really interesting.
I also think there's like context of when they were losing to get those high draft picks.
Right.
I believe Clay was hurt, and then like other people were like in and out of the lineup.
Right.
Which hard derailed the team at the time. Which though kind of is almost like a blessing in disguise now. Like, of course you're not going to think that at the time, but now while we're talking about how they took that in between approach that you said,
right.
Now they have a great problem in a sense of like, you know, we got talent out the wazoo.
It's really like a first world problem. A lot of like NBA fans are like, basically, oh God, we're gonna have to watch more Golden State for the next however many years because they're back again and they have new talent now. Oh no, right? So it's like almost like making the best out of a really terrible situation, which honestly is like if you're gonna capitalize on something bad happening, you might as well get like really good picks. So Mike, let's try this. Are you tilted?
I'm always tilted. Are you tilted, dude?
Dude, I'm always tilted. I'm tilted number 1, 2, 3, all the way down the line. I'm always tilted. No matter what episode, no matter what season we're on.